It's the first house I've ever bought. Many of my friends consider it a great achievement for someone in their late 20s, but I suspect it'll be the last house I ever buy. There was something not right about it. I should have trusted my gut when I saw that strange little space in the basement. It wasn't big enough to be considered a room. It was the wrong height to be a closet of any kind. Perhaps it held some sort of heating unit from the past. The house was mostly new. I say mostly because it was built over the foundation of an older house, so that strange space was probably part of the other building. Despite it being empty, it felt oddly full. Standing close to it made me feel how I imagine a small dog might feel, picking up the territory marked by a wolf. But the price was good, so I ignored my instincts. The agent told me the owner had suddenly received a new job opportunity across town and did not want to spend 3 hours driving to and fro from work every day. They were looking to sell fast, and if I could get past the minor fix-ups the property required, this was a steal. It was in an up-and-coming property area with several schools and shopping malls planned to be built within a 15-minute drive. How could I pass up the opportunity? I told myself that I could probably just seal up the creepy basement as I got my finances together. Part of me knew that I was never going to get around to that. Most likely I'd just sit up here and never enter the basement. I've survived here for a year and 6 months, 12 days, and I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. No, I can't just leave. One of them appears to have attached itself to me, and I'm scared that if I move, it'll follow me. Then I'll have to set up a new routine to keep it at bay. Failing that, well, I have no idea what it does when it catches up. I have no intention of finding out. Yes, I'll admit I have one of those personality types where I leave things until the last minute. But I have made it this far in life, so leave me alone, okay? It began, as many things do, with knocking in the walls. I thought it was just creaks of wood in the house settling. What else could it be, right? That was until my friend came over to stay one night. I'm an introvert, so holding a house party was an unattractive prospect, but my extrovert adopter, Vivian, had been very excited for my first house purchase, and having disappointed her regarding the lack of a house party, I made her the consolation prize of being my first guest to sleep over. I'd only stayed in the house for a couple of weeks. A lot of things were still in boxes, and I had not shopped for much furniture. After a simple dinner, we made ourselves cozy with sleeping bags, nachos, soft drinks, and my brand new television. We were in the middle of a good conversation when the knocking came. V sat up, with her eyes scanning the ceiling as if looking for the source. I stared at her quizzically, but suddenly she asked aloud, "Is anyone there?" We stayed silent, just as I was about to say something. Several knocks sounded. V broke into a half grin. "What are you doing?" I asked her. "Didn't you notice? That rapping sound," she said, eyes still scanning the ceiling. "Yeah, I've heard it since I moved in, just the house settling." "Sounds like it's been trying to participate in our conversation," V put in. I hadn't noticed the knocking when we were talking for the last 3 hours, but then the odd knocks had become somewhat background noise to me. It was about 11 o'clock at night, and the hair on the back of my neck was standing up. I did not do well with spooky things. The last horror movie I had watched had kept me awake for 3 weeks, and I swore to never do that again. Can we maybe not test this?" I squeaked, but I could see that V had that look in her eye, and I'd never successfully dissuaded her from doing anything. "1 knock for yes, 2 for no," she persisted, calling out loudly to the ceiling. Then, leaning over to me, completely ignorant of my wide-eyed discomfort, she whispered, "I watched this in a documentary once. A family communicated with a spirit in their house this way." What happened to the family?" I asked, not sure if I wanted to know. A sharp rap from the ceiling was my reply. No, I announced, standing up. "We are leaving this instant." I was preparing to get into a pair of jeans, grab my keys, and go somewhere, anywhere but here. Late hour be damned. V snorted and laughed at me. Don't be silly. Okay. We don't have to continue. You haven't had any bad experiences here for the past couple of weeks, right? No, I said, relieved she was going to stop whatever the heck was going on. It was true. I hadn't actually gotten the creeps or had any nightmares since moving in. Then it's just some creaking, right? Even if it is something, she said, and I winced at the thought. It seems like it's friendly. Okay, but any further knocking or seeking of responses, and we're going to stay over at your place for the night. She smiled and placed a hand on my arm. We had one of those platonic relationships, always on the verge of turning into something more, but never doing so, as other things always got in the way. We spent the remainder of the night watching videos on the internet while trying not to doze off on the floor in our sleeping bags. We finally lost the fight around 2 in the morning. There were no more knocks that night. I woke up the next day from the sunlight pouring into the room. I rolled over, wondering what time it was and realizing that V was not in her sleeping bag. I listened out for water running in the bathroom or the shower, but I didn't hear anything. No sounds from the kitchen either. Puzzled, I fumbled for my glasses and dragged myself to my feet. I found her outside, still in her pajamas, sitting on the porch swing. She had her chin in her hands, staring at the grass by the pavement. She had her car keys, phone, and purse by her side. Hey, what's going on? She turned and gave me a small smile, then asked if we could go grab brunch somewhere. I replied sure and went back in and did a quick change. Just before I got out, she poked her head in the door and asked if I could grab the rest of her stuff. Although I felt a bit off about the abrupt end to her stay, I didn't question her. Grabbing her day clothes and toiletry bag, I headed out. We drove in her pajamas over to her place, some 20 minutes away. Then she went in to change. I waited for her in the car. We hadn't said much to each other on the drive over. I knew when she was ready, she'd tell me what was going on. We went to a nearby cafe, one of our regular haunts. As we settled down to our meal, she finally confessed she'd gone and communicated further with the knocking early this morning while I slept. I gave a deep groan and put my head in my hands. I was annoyed, but I could rarely remain angry with Vivian. V, of all the things. Why? I live there alone, and I spook easy. I'm sorry, I'd totally forgotten about it by this morning, but right as I finished brushing my teeth and stepped out into the corridor, I heard the tapping. Okay, are you sure I want to hear this? I kind of need you to hear this. I sat up, hearing the askance for help in my friend's voice. Go on then, I sighed. Look, in the documentary I watched, it was about 3 girls in the 1800s or something who claimed that their house was haunted by a spirit who let them predict the future. The spirit would communicate via knocks, 1 for yes, 2 for no. They turned the whole thing into a fortune-telling business. Some say they were eventually outed, with people discovering hidden devices under the kitchen table where they held their seances to create the rapping noises. Of course, others still believe it's a true story. She shifted nervously. So I thought I'd ask if the knocking knew the future. As easily as I spooked, I raised an eyebrow incredulously. You're joking, right? It didn't actually predict something. Did it? Well, I mean, not exactly. Not right away, she said, her arms folded as she stared at the floor. I asked if it could tell me the future. It answered yes. I didn't ask about the future to test it at first. I started by asking how many boyfriends I've had. It answered 6, by knocking that many times. But you've had 5. Well, technically, I've had 6. I just never counted the first one as a real boyfriend. Okay, creepy, but not beyond coincidence. Well, then I asked about my street number. It rapped 3 times, 4 times, then 7 times. And I guess that is correct. I'm in Unit 3, number 47. So I was convinced. She fell quiet. Then what? Then I asked when I would die. You what? She sighed. Look, I just thought it wouldn't be that serious a question to ask. Which part of knowing when you were going to die isn't that serious? I cried in apoplexy. I closed my eyes and took a very deep breath. Okay, I get it. It was surreal. This sort of thing doesn't usually happen. You got caught up in the moment, as if this were one of those internet sites where it would tell you your death date. Then what happened? She looked like she was about to cry. Well, it didn't answer at first, so I thought I was being clever. I asked how many decades I had left. No response. So I asked how many years. Still no response. Months? Nothing. Weeks? Nothing. Then I asked how many days I had left. I held my breath. 4, she said. Like I said, I spook pretty easily, and obviously, I have a soft spot for V. Inclinations for trying to communicate recklessly with the supernatural notwithstanding. So, we made a plan. The few people I had told this to had laughed, but it was what really happened. We asked ourselves how we could avoid as many horror movie tropes as possible. First things first, I decided I wasn't going to stay at my house for the next few days. Instead, I would stay with V for the whole week. I worked from home, so there was no big deal where I was staying, as long as I had my laptop. Secondly, we got into a bit of a debate about exactly what 4 days meant. Was that morning day 1, or was it day 0? Were we counting in hours from the time V asked the question? Just to accommodate for all timing constituents, we decided that days 3, 4, and 5 we would be strictly in V's unit. We would stock up on groceries and supplies and order food if we had to. V was still at university, so she'd miss a lab class, but could get all her lectures and assignments online. Thirdly, on day 4, the most likely day of the prediction, we would invite as many friends over as possible for dinner and board games. Really push the vibe as far away from spooky as possible. Also, we would have the safety of company and numbers. We figured if she was going to die from something medical and sudden, then maybe there was nothing we could do to prevent it, but we would reduce the chances of anything supernatural as much as possible by doing this. We were probably drawing inspiration from too many horror movies, but it didn't feel silly at the time. We went back to my house later that day. V wouldn't enter the house, but I steeled myself to grab whatever I needed as fast as I could. I did hear the creaking a couple of times. Really gave me a chill when I heard the sudden snap overhead in the bathroom. But I kept telling myself I didn't have to respond to it. If I didn't respond to it, then it would leave me to do my thing as it had all this time. Also, this was ridiculous, and surely V's experiments was coincidental at best. We had quite an unremarkable week, all things considered. As the 4th day came and went, V was still alive. I kept her within view most of the day. We spent the evening in the midst of board games and good company, so we barely noticed when the clock passed midnight. Nothing even remotely dangerous or creepy occurred. Then the 5th day passed without incident, and we allowed ourselves to giggle nervously at how we had believed in this kind of thing. She was even beginning to act tough again, but I know that she'd believed things enough to call her mom, who was a serious issue, during the week, just in case. By the 6th day, Saturday, I decided I should head back. I could not stay at her apartment forever, and we were both beginning to need our space. But I'll admit it, I was still spooked. It was evening when I arrived home. I was about to prepare dinner when I heard a rap. Something in me roused an emotion akin to anger. Assertiveness? I'd spent an entire week fearful and dedicated to a crazy notion that the knocking sound might have been a real supernatural thing. I was tired in a way, and aside from seriously considering selling the house I had just moved into because of an occasional creak, I decided I was just going to have to get over myself and prove that it was all rubbish. "Hello?" I said. My voice did not sound as brave as I wanted it to. There was no response. Was that you?" It was a very loud creak that made me jump. "Okay," I gasped, trying to gain control of my breathing. I could feel the blood drain out of my face. If you're real, let's make a deal." A knock. "I don't even want to see what you are. I never want to get any sense of your presence, aside from the knocking. In return, I won't do anything about you. Is that possible?" Even today, I can hardly believe I was able to muster that. And yes, I realized that my proposal was not really a sensible trade of any kind, but I doubt many would have done better in such a situation. A single knock. It agreed. Okay, cool. Then I took a deep breath, not believing this was actually communicating with me. The last thing I want to ask you, why'd you tell my friend she was going to die in 4 days? 4 sharp raps, followed by several long scratches. It felt like it was laughing. The prolonged sound made me seize up, and I fought the instinct to just get the hell out of the house and drive to my parents. You were joking?" A knock. All right. No more jokes, okay? This is really all I can handle." Silence. It remained silent for the rest of the evening. I can't believe I have ever been so scared and so brave in my life that weekend. I went about life, shutting every open door to empty rooms, turning on every single light, and having a lot of music on to change the mood. But I'd play the music only on speakers and not earphones, because I wanted to hear if anything was coming. There were creaks now and then, but they could truly have been the house settling. Or perhaps just my housemate, minding its own business. I never told anyone, but I did give the presence a nickname. I called it Knox, and it would turn out to be the friendliest of the 5 entities that presented itself in my house. I haven't even told you about my experience in the basement space yet, but I'm sure I will. You're still here. I thought you might be. Thanks for joining me for tonight's story. If your insatiable appetite for horror knows no bounds, might I suggest one of our playlists, or one of our previous stories in the archive? There should be one appearing at the end of the story any minute now. And of course, if you're not subscribed, why not go ahead and hit that subscribe button? Maybe hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of the spooky things that we do here. If you prefer your horror a little more analog, you can always pick up one of my books. There's a link below to my latest, and it'll take you to all the great things that I've posted on Amazon. For my book lovers in the audience, I always suggest coming on down to Patreon so you can become part of my ghostly reader tier and get a book anytime I write one, which is usually about twice a year. Speaking of my patrons, let's go ahead and thank them, shall we? Thanks to Unicorn Hollow for being our spooky ghost contributor. Thanks to Janet and Lady Vengeance for being our spooky skeleton tier contributors. Thanks to Hi Stacy, Winter, Xaronan, Emily Coltsfoot, Stephanie Carrington, Marianne Schuler, Tyler Parker, and Jennifer Damron for being our ghostly reader tier contributors. Thanks, everyone. We just couldn't do the show without you. If you think you might like to support the show in a more monetary fashion, come on down to Patreon. I have many tiers. I'm sure you'll find one that suits you best. I always recommend the Ghostly Reader tier, since you get a signed book anytime I write one on your doorstep. But I have many tiers, and again, I'm sure you'll find one to suit you. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.